Assassin's Creed Rogue had the unenviable task of competing with Assassin's Creed Unity, the first AC game to be built for the next-gen consoles at the time, as they were both released on the same day. I think most people opted to try Unity over Rogue, which didn't turn out super well for Ubisoft. And as a result, Rogue fell by the wayside for some fans of the series, myself included. I remember walking into an EB Games around the time Unity was released and browsing through the 360 shelf because I didn't have a next-gen console at the time, and discovering Rogue for the first time. I didn't even know the game existed, so poor was Ubisoft's marketing for it. I eventually got Rogue on the PS3 and played the first 3 or so hours of it before getting bored with it and putting it down. This will be my first time playing through the whole game, except this time it's the remastered version. I knew going into Rogue this time around that it was a fan favorite amongst those who played it, with a lot of people claiming it to be their favorite in the series. Well, I can tell you right now that it's definitely not my favorite. In fact, it probably wouldn't even be in my top 5 of the series. But I didn't dislike the game, I just feel like it's a bit overhyped for what it actually is. I played Assassin's Creed Rogue on the Xbox One S for one playthrough. There will be spoilers for the game in this video, you have been warned. Since I originally only played about 3 hours of Rogue, I can't really remember much about how the game looked. But after doing some research, it turns out it's not that different. Essentially, Rogue Remastered is the PC version of the game at max settings running on console at 30 frames per second instead of 60. Granted, it's a rock solid 30 frames per second, I never noticed a single instance of the frame rate dropping, but it's still 30 frames per second. Ubisoft is as predictable as the sunrise when it comes to their remasters. Much like AC4, you'll spend a lot of time sailing around the game world in Rogue, with the lush and tropical Caribbean setting of Black Flag traded for the frigid and freezing North Atlantic Ocean around North America. What that means is that instead of seeing palm trees and sandy beaches, you'll see icebergs, snow, and pine forests. It does look good, however, I found Rogue's setting to be nowhere near as compelling as Black Flag's was, as we've basically already seen it in Assassin's Creed 3. The draw distance is great, meaning you won't be accidentally recreating the Titanic while playing. There is a lot of poppin', however, when you're running around on land. The ocean and waves look just as enchanting as they did in AC4, except this time around they're freezing cold, so if you stay in too long you'll freeze to death. Animations are just as good as they were in AC4, but I'm pretty sure that some animations are reused as well. I can excuse some of the corners cut in this game as it had a really short development time, as we can see from the return of our trusty chart here. The character models are nicely detailed and Shay's outfit is pretty damn badass. No, not that one. Yeah, that one. I also appreciate the amount of skins and outfits in this game, which Ubisoft has actually been pretty good at providing with the series as a whole without any additional cost, so far. Voice acting is pretty good all around, though there are a couple weak performances amongst the cast, such as Gist. The sound design is great. Sailing the Atlantic and hearing the scraping and cracking of ice as you sail through it is a nice contrast to the ocean soundscape of Black Flag, even though most of the sounds are the same. The soundtrack is also great and sounds kind of like a greatest hits of the series, with tracks that remind me of the first game, AC3 Black Flag, and even a new take on Ezio's theme from AC2. Rogue takes place during the 7-year war between England and France. You play as Shay Cormac, an assassin turned Templar. Shay's story is the focal point of Rogue, and we get to see how Shay becomes a Templar. This is the first time in the series where we have a Templar protagonist. We did play as Hatham for a bit in AC3, but he wasn't the main character. Assassin's Creed Rogue simultaneously acts as a sequel to AC4 and a prequel to AC3, as well as being connected to Unity, as Shay is the Templar responsible for killing Arno's father. I have played Unity before, but I couldn't remember if Shay actually appeared in the game, and upon looking it up, it seems like Shay doesn't actually play a part in Unity at all, so that seems weird. I'm sure I'll have more to say about it in my Unity video, so for now I'll just forget about that. Shay begins the story as an assassin and is tasked with retrieving a couple precursor artifacts from Templar hands, which makes up around the first 3 or so hours of the game. Once retrieved, Achilles then tasks Shay with finding a piece of Eden, aka another precursor artifact from a temple located in Lisbon. Shay finds the artifact, and as he attempts to remove it, it disintegrates in his hands and causes a massive earthquake that completely levels the city and kills thousands of people. Shay returns to Achilles, furious at what took place, and accuses him of knowing what would happen. Shay's outrage is ignored and he is pushed away by the other assassins. Unwilling to allow another Lisbon to happen, Shay sneaks into Achilles' homestead to steal the manuscript and box and hide them away. Shay is found out and subsequently shot by the assassins and assumed dead as he fell into the ocean with the artifacts. Shay wakes up in the home of a couple in New York, and it is here that he is introduced to several Templars who Shay ends up helping to fight off assassin influence in New York and North America, as he no longer believes in the Assassin's Creed. He isn't a Templar yet in the second act of the game, but it is where the seeds are planted. The assassins manage to retrieve the manuscript, and eventually Shay decides to join the Templar Order, with the last act of the game seeing Shay hunt down the last of his former assassin allies in order to prevent them from using the manuscript to find another precursor temple. Overall, Rogue's core idea of an assassin becoming a Templar and then hunting down his old comrades is an interesting and compelling one, rich with storytelling opportunities. Unfortunately, I don't really feel like Ubisoft capitalizes on the potential that the story had. I knew that Rogue would feature Shay defecting from the assassins before I played it, as it wasn't a secret or some sort of twist, it was in all the trailers. I was expecting some sort of story about how Shay became disillusioned with the ideals of the Creed, coming to believe that freedom was not a goal worth striving for, and allying with the Templars because their ideology was the right one in his view. I was hoping for some of the philosophical and ideological debates and arguments we had seen in previous games like AC1 and AC3. Unfortunately, that isn't what we get. Rogue chooses the most obvious and uninteresting way of making Shay become a Templar. The assassins do a bad thing, they all act like dumb assholes about it, and Shay goes, "Fuck you guys, I'm out." It makes all the assassins seem like brain-dead idiots, especially Achilles, who we've already seen to be an intelligent character in AC3. But in Rogue, it seems like they turned down his IQ points by several dozen, making him completely ignore anything Shay has to say about the mission he was sent on, which makes the ending of the game unintentionally hilarious to me. Achilles and Liam manage to find another precursor temple, and as soon as Achilles sees the artifact, this is what he says.
Shay was right.
Wow, you don't fucking say. He could have avoided the entire Assassin Brotherhood from being destroyed if he'd only listened to Shay. For some reason, Shay seems to already have doubts about the Brotherhood's mission from the earliest parts of the game, asking questions that you'd think anyone who's already in the Order would already know the answers to. But he also seems to be rather new to the Order, as he is put through training exercises by his fellow assassins upon arriving at the Davenport homestead. Which is bizarre, because if he's a new recruit but already having doubts about the assassins, then why did he join in the first place? And why does Achilles send Shay, the least experienced assassin he has, to find the manuscript and box if they are so important? Surely sending your most experienced assassins would be the best choice to find something Achilles wanted so badly. The game does try to make you care about some of the other assassins in the first act of the game, but we don't really spend enough time with them to actually develop any sense of attachment towards them. So later in the game, when you eventually kill them all, I didn't feel anything. Except for Adewale, but he isn't a new character, and his character is still intact from Black Flag and Freedom Cry. He didn't get the same treatment Achilles did. The game is actually pretty short for an Assassin's Creed game, with the main story taking around 8 to 9 hours to complete, which on the one hand I was kind of happy with because I wasn't super invested in the game, but having a few extra hours to flesh out some of the characters, both Templars and Assassins, could have benefited the story, I think. Rogue also sees the continuation of the present day storyline, sort of. You are once again an employee working for Abstergo at the same office as the last game, however you aren't playing as the same character you played in Black Flag. The present day story mirrors Shay, as this time around your character, dubbed Numbskull by an incredibly annoying side character, is inducted into the Templar Order as well. I don't really have too much to say here. I've lost most of my interest in the present day storyline since Desmond died, and they haven't really done much to spark new interest yet either. I did like the short video files that Otso Berg put together on key figures in the series, but solving the same type of puzzle over and over again to unlock them got old really quickly. Gameplay-wise, Rogue is Black Flag again with a few changes here and there. You'll still be sailing your ship around the world map, engaging in sea battles and doing Assassin's Creed stuff like stealthily assassinating targets, free running on, over, and across anything and everything in sight, and getting into sword fights. Free running is exactly the same, so moving on. Combat is exactly the same, moving on. Running around the world and picking up all manner of side objectives is exactly the same. Listen, I've said that Assassin's Creed needed to revamp its combat system since my Liberation review, and I expanded that revamp idea to include the rest of the gameplay in my Black Flag review. The series needs a reworking of its core ideas. I know that it's going to get it, as this is a retrospective video, so I know that Origins, Odyssey, and Valhalla exist, and that the series did make a shift to new ideas. However, this is the 8th AC game I've played in a relatively short time span, and I'm struggling to stay excited for the next couple games because I know they aren't the change I'm hoping for. I mean, I also got burnt out on the series back when Black Flag was released when I had a year off between games, so the sense of repetition and lack of enthusiasm I'm currently feeling for the series is not something that's only resulted from playing so many of them so quickly. Ubisoft has made too many of these games with too little innovation and new ideas between titles, and it eventually bit them in the ass. Just to be clear, I'm not saying that you need to reinvent the wheel every game, but I am saying that when you've released 9 games, because Rogue and Unity were released on the same day as I said earlier, with basically the same formula in a span of 7 years, that's too much. That's just too fucking much. So let's get into what's actually changed. For one thing, the sailing has been tweaked a little, with Shay's ship, the Morrigan, being a little more responsive than the Jackdaw was, with tighter controls making maneuvering in smaller areas easier. You can sail through ice patches and break small icebergs as well. Shay gets a puckle gun on his ship, which is essentially a rapid-fire turret which can make quick work of smaller boats and do quite a bit of damage to larger vessels. It's a cool addition that speeds up the flow of naval combat somewhat. Speaking of speeding up, you can also go full Leroy Jenkins and do a sped up ramming attack like your ship has some of that Need for Speed nitro boost installed on the back. It's actually a lot of fun ramming into ships like you're trying to take them down, as if you're playing Burnout Paradise Ship Edition. The ram goes both ways, however. If you get rammed by an enemy ship of appropriate size, you will actually get boarded by the other ship. This is a pretty sick addition that I'm surprised wasn't in Black Flag. It only happened a handful of times in my playthrough, but every time it did happen, it was pretty exciting having to fend off enemy boarders and being on the receiving end of something I did so much of in Black Flag. Something to note is that Rogue doesn't have any multiplayer, which makes it the first AC game to not include a multiplayer component since Brotherhood. But Rogue did take a couple cues from the multiplayer of past games and included a new enemy type called Stalkers. Stalkers hide in hay bales or bushes or atop rooftops in order to get a surprise attack on Shay. Whenever you're in the vicinity of a stalker, you'll begin to hear whispers, and once you hear them, you need to activate Eagle Vision, which brings up the same circle detection meter that exists in Assassin's Creed's multiplayer mode, allowing you to find the stalkers and kill them. If you do end up missing one, all you have to do is counter the stalker the way you would any enemy and you get an instant kill. So they're not actually that big of a threat. Honestly, they're just kind of annoying, as oftentimes when you try to make your way around the various cities and outposts in the game world, you'll be bombarded by whispers all the time. Rogue adopts the areas of varying difficulty level that was implemented in Black Flag for the world map into New York, which is also something Unity did with France. It doesn't seem to make that much of a difference, however, as I never really noticed any areas being any more or less difficult in practice. New York also has its own version of the fort seen in the world map called Gang Headquarters. To complete a gang headquarter, you must kill its leader, cut down their flag, and a third objective that varies depending on which one you're doing. These are quite fun, and the leader of the headquarters can actually be challenging to kill provided you don't assassinate him. Shay has a couple new weapons, the air rifle and grenade launcher. Yes, you heard me right, grenade launcher. Shay has 3 types of grenades: sleep grenades, berserk grenades, and shrapnel grenades, which are just regular grenades. It's a pretty insane weapon to have in combat situations, but I enjoyed it, so what the hell. And the air rifle is just the darts or blowpipe from previous games. Some enemies can throw down a cloud of harmful gas that can hurt and slow down Shay, but Shay can just equip a new quote-unquote gas mask to counter it, so the gas is kind of a non-entity. Rogue is not an amazing game, but it's not a bad game either. I feel like I say that quite a lot on this channel, but I guess that means when I finally do play a game that's just straight up bad, you'll know I mean it. Rogue is Black Flag again with a few tweaks in terms of its gameplay and core design. The difference is that where Black Flag was designed completely around the sailing experience and pirate fantasy, Rogue just kind of feels like the sailing is incidental. It's a great mechanic, but it doesn't have the same thematic tie-in with the narrative that Black Flag does. And the story, while being a great idea, is let down by some unfortunate decisions that don't really make the most out of the excellent premise. I do think that a lot of the issues I have with Rogue are due to a very short development cycle rather than laziness, resulting in the developers not having enough time to fully flesh out their narrative or innovate with the game design. What is lazy, however, is the so-called remaster part of this experience. If you call bringing the PC version of a last-gen console game to current-gen consoles with 4K resolution a remaster, then I guess it's excusable. Personally though, I don't really consider that a remaster, I consider it an updated port. If you've never played Rogue before and don't own a gaming PC, then I would say get the remastered version of the game absolutely. But if you do own a gaming PC, I would say get the PC version of Rogue, not the remaster, as you'll get access to a higher frame rate and more or less the same visuals as the remaster. Overall, I enjoyed Rogue, but don't plan on returning to it anytime soon. But I would still recommend you pick it up and try it for yourself, because as I mentioned in the beginning of the video, Rogue is a fan favorite. So there's a good chance that you'll end up enjoying the game more than me. I'm going to give Assassin's Creed Rogue Remastered a 7 out of 10. I mentioned in my Limbo review that Rogue would be the last AC review for at least a couple months, because there's a few games I want to catch up on before the end of the year, and a few new releases to play in the coming months as well, like Cyberpunk. Please, dear Lord of Gaming, do not let that game be delayed again. If you enjoyed this video, consider leaving a like, subscribing, and commenting your thoughts on Rogue. Thanks for watching.